Welcome to It's All Good in Theory, Course 2. I'm Music Cyclops. Thanks for being with me. Now, we're going to start off by looking at musical repeats. So why say something twice when you can only say it once? That's really the idea of a repeat. And to show you how it works visually, I'm going to set up a 4-bar phrase. So I'll use bar lines to set up my 4 bars. And my 4-bar phrase is going to be the first 4 lines of the New Zealand National Anthem in Māori. And I'm going to call each bar after the letter of the first word that I need to sing, which is going to help to remind me what to sing. So the first bar is E ihoa atua Ona iwi matura Ata whakarongona Me aroha noa. So those are my first 4 bars set up. Now if I wanted that phrase sung twice, I could of course write everything again and the musician would read through and sing that phrase twice. But it seems a little bit unnecessary when I can use a repeat symbol to get this first line to be sung twice. How I do it is I go to where I want the repeat to start and I turn my bar line into a double bar line. And I do that also at the end. And then on the insides of the phrase, and they work a little bit like fingers, kind of grabbing this phrase and saying repeat this, are 2 dots on the inside of each bar line. And now when the musician reads it, it's going to be E ihoa atua ona iwi matura Ata whakarongona me aroha noa. E ihoa atua ona iwi matura Ata whakarongona me aroha noa. So basically I've set up a structure that works like this: bar E, bar O, bar A, bar M, bar E1, bar O1, bar A1, bar M1. Now I'm going to set up a different kind of repeat scenario. I want the following pattern. I want E ihoa atua Ona iwi matura Ata whakarongona me aroha noa. Ona iwi matura Ata whakarongona. So I want this combination of E, O, A, M, O, A. So the second time I do the O, I'm going to call that O1. Second time I repeat A, I'm going to call that A1. So if we look at that in our bar structure, I want the first bar, E, then I want the O, then I want A, then I want M, and then I'm going to repeat, but I don't go back to bar E. I need to go back to here, and then to here. Now one of the ways we can set that up is by using a symbol and an instruction called Dal Segno. I'll write that here in Italian, Dal Segno. Now Dal just means go to. Segno is sign, and if you think of the English word S-I-G-N, S-E-G-N, segno, so it's all linked linguistically. So we're going to go to a sign. So it would be really logical that our sign would be placed where we bounce back. After bar M, we're going to go back to O. So we would put a sign right here and an instruction during the bar of M that at the end of this bar, go back to the sign. So this segno, this sign, what does it actually look like? Now I have to admit, if I don't do segnos for a little while, I forget how to do them. I know there are three combinations. There's a straight line, there's a S-shaped line on a bit of a lean, and there's two dots. But exactly where everything goes, I get a little bit foggy about. So just this morning I came up with a little story. It's a sailing story, and there was a great big wave that came up. And then S is my symbol for ship. It actually knocked the ship a little bit sideways. So it started to capsize the ship. And so the ship sent out a distress signal. It's obviously an old sailing scenario because they send out a Morse code message, which is ... to say we're in trouble. Now, I will admit that's not the greatest story that has ever been told, but it's certainly the best one I can come up with this morning. So the wave comes, it knocks the ship sideways, and the ship sends out its distress signal. And that's what a segno looks like. The key thing really is that after you're told to go back to the sign, you can't really then be a bit puzzled as to what the sign is, because that's a pretty funky looking symbol. You know, it really bounces off the page just because of how strange it is. So let's put that in. Right at the start of bar 2, the wave is going to come, it's going to blow the ship off its axis, and it's going to send out a ... distress signal. So we've set up the sign where we need the musician to go back, and now all we need to do is in this final bar, we need to tell them where to jump, and then finally we need to tell them that they're going to end the piece of music after the second time of playing bar A. So here, during bar M, just above the music, we're going to write DS, which is short for Dal Segno, and we're going to write an instruction Al Fine. Now, have a look at the word fine. It's very similar to our word finish, and it's an instruction to stop playing the music. So we've got our D, S, Al Fine, and then we have a double bar line. Now we don't have the two dots because that would indicate a repeat back, which would go all the way back to another repeat symbol, or even back to the beginning of the piece if there was no repeat symbol. This becomes our repeat. Go back to the sign and then stop at where I tell you the fine is. So now the musician jumps back to the sign and is going to play bar O, then bar A, and then they'd play bar M if we didn't tell them to stop. So right here we're going to create another double bar line, but this one has a really fat second line. And that's called a final bar line. That shows that the music is actually going to stop. And we have the word just nice and close to that, fine. So let's have a look at what happens now. We have bar E to begin. Then bar O, then bar A, then bar M, then the player looks and sees that there's a DS Al Fine, So after playing bar M, they go back and they play O, and then they play A, and then they finish. And so I've achieved what it was we wanted to get, which is a piece of music that goes like this. E o a tu a o na iwi matura ata whakarongo na me aroha noa o na iwi matura ata whakarongo na, and then we finish. So we use a Dal Fine if we want to go back to some point which is along the way but not all the way back to the beginning of the piece, and then we want them to stop early just at some point where we put the Fine. Quite often though, music will have a special ending, and our word in Italian for ending is coda, which actually means tail. So if you imagine, you know, the end of the dog is its tail, the end of the piece of music is the coda. So what if we wanted somebody to go back and do a partial repeat, for which we use the DS, but instead of then finishing, at some point we want them then to jump to the tail of the music, just to end with something different. So for this I'm just going to set up one extra bar of our New Zealand National Anthem. So we've got E o ha tua o na iwi matura ata whakarongo na me aroha noa. And we're going to put a fifth bar, Kia hua ko te pai. So now we have a 5-bar structure. Now what I'm going to do is I want us to set up the following scenario. We're going to go E, O, A, M. We're going to DS and do O and A again. And then here, instead of a Fine ending, we're going to jump to K, which is going to be our coda, and we're going to finish there. So if I just sketch out what this is going to do, we're going to do bar E, then O, then A, then M, then O1 to show we're doing it again, then A1, and then K. Right, so let's get to work. The first 4 bars just run exactly like they are. So I'm going to cross them off my order. And by the time we get to here, we've done those. Now we need to go back to O1. Now it's not the very beginning of our phrase, so a regular repeat won't work. So we're going to put a DS. So I'll put a double bar line where I want them to jump. I'll give them the instruction to jump, DS, short for Dal Segno. But this time, instead of saying Al Fine, which is a clue that at some point the music is going to ask you just to stop dead, we're going to say Al Coda. So a translation of this is jump back to the sign, and then when you see an instruction, jump to the coda, and that is going to end our piece of music. So the musician comes along here. The first thing they're going to go to is the sign. So we need to place the sign. So we're going to place that above the bar line that starts bar O, so that we get O1. So a great big wave comes along, knocks the ship sideways, and they send a distress signal of ... in Morse code. So now I've got my sign. And then that means that the music will play O1 and then A1, so I've got those right. And here is where we need to jump to K, so we don't play M. So again, I'm going to need a double bar line, which always cues that something interesting is happening, like the end of a section of the music. And we need an instruction to go to the coda. And for some reason, we use English now and we say to coda. So while they're playing bar A1, they're instructed to go to the coda. And along with this double bar line, a coda symbol is used, and make that just line up with your bar line. So that's a plus sign with a circle. So that's our instruction to go to our coda, and then we just need to then assign bar K as the coda, so we have the same symbol again at the beginning of the bar line that starts our coda, and we have the word coda. And then if we want the music to finish with bar K, I need to do a final bar line, so that's a double bar line in which the right hand one is fat. And now I can cross off K. So let's just check. I've got bar E, bar O, bar A, bar M. Instruction to go back to the sign. So I play O1 and then A1, and then I'm told to jump to the coda at the end of that bar. I jump from coda symbol to coda symbol. I play K, and then I finish the music. So this is how it would sound. E o a tu a o na iwi matora ata whakarongona me aroha noa o na iwi matora ata whakarongona kia hua ko te pai. And that music will end on a nice high note. Along with an instruction to DS, go back to the sign, and a traditional double bar line repeat phrase with the two dots on the inside. There's another kind of repeat that we're asked to do sometimes, which is a DC. DC stands in Latin for da capo. So da means go to, just like Dal did in the Segno phrase. Da is go to. And capo means the beginning. Do you remember we looked at the coda, in Italian meaning tail, the end of the piece of music? Well, the capo means the head. So the idea is that the dog starts with its head and ends with its tail, and that's what happens with music as well. If you think of, we use the word cap, which is something that you wear on your head. So there's a relationship between cap, capo, head, beginning of the music. So da capo just means go back to the very beginning of the music. And we can do a da capo al fine and a da capo al coda, just like we did with the Dal Segno. So let's start off with a da capo al fine. We want to set up a phrase that is going to go like this. E o ha tua o na iwi matora ata whakarongona me aroha noa. E o ha tua o na iwi matora, and end. Well, the first 4 bars are going to run just as they're written. But if I was to use a traditional double bar line repeat structure, I would get E1, O1, A1, M1. But I only want E1 and O1, and then I want us to stop. So we're going to go E, O, A, M, E1, O1, finish. Now obviously I could write E and then O and then put my final bar line at the end there, but I want to actually save some bars. So we're going to set up a da capo. So the first thing we do is we'll put a double bar line at the end of the first 4 bars, because the first 4 bars are going to run just as usual. So I'll cross them off now, E, O, A and M. And now we need to go back to the beginning for E, then O, and then we end. So we're going to have an instruction here which is da capo, abbreviated D.C. and then until I tell you to finish. Da capo al fine. That means the musician's going to go straight back, sing the first bar again, so that becomes E1, and then we want O1, and then we want them to finish here. So the 2 things we need to do is put a final bar line, so that's our double bar line in which the right hand side is fat. And we have the word fine just above that bar line, or above that bar, fairly close to the bar line. So let's check what we've got. E o ha tua o na iwi matora ata whakarongona me aroha noa. Back to the beginning and stop at the fine. E o ha tua o na iwi matora, and the fine. So I got E, O, A, M, E1, O1 and finish. So let's now set up a DC Al coda. So I'm going to set up my bar 5, which is going to be our coda. Kia hua ko te pai. And that's going to be the end of our piece of music. And this is the pattern that I'd like to set up. E o hatua o na iwi matura ata whakarongona me aroha noa. E o hatua o na iwi matura kia hua ko te pai. So we've got a pattern of E, O, A, M, E1, O1 and K. Well, our first 4 bars are going to run just as usual, so I'll cross them off our list here. And now I need to go back to E, which is the very first bar, so a DC is going to be appropriate. So let's put in a double bar line at the end of bar M, and the instruction da capo, but this time al coda. So go back to the beginning and then go via the coda when I tell you to jump there. So we need no symbol at the beginning because da capo says go back to the beginning, so we don't use any symbol. And we're going to have E1 and O1. And at this point we need to jump to the coda, which is K. So right here, another double bar line. And we need the instruction to coda. And right on top of that bar line, we've got our first coda symbol. And then to mark bar K as the coda, I need the coda symbol again and the word coda. And that means at the end of O1, we are going to jump to the coda and then finish the piece of music. So this is what our music sounds like now. E o ahatua o na iwi matura ata whakarongo na me aroha noa. E o ahatua o na iwi matura ki ahua ko te pai